The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everyone. It's 12 o'clock and we'll get started. We still have people coming in. It's probably a little difficult to get into a webinar at lunchtime. Arrange your calendar so you can do everything. But hopefully everybody will be along shortly. I'm Jim Lewis and I'll be working with you again today. And our topic is systems cause behavior, which may sound a bit intriguing to some of you, and for some of you it may be very obvious. As a matter of fact, in looking for art to illustrate this, I found this one of a bus being driven by a chimpanzee, monkey, some kind of a creature, and I thought that's kind of a good example because our traffic systems cause people to act really differently than they do normally sometimes with all the stress, frustration, traffic types and things of that nature. So that's just one simple example of how a system itself can influence us to be very different than we would be normally. But it's much more insidious than that, if you will, because in the workplace this has significant consequences. Let's begin though by defining what we mean by a system. And a system is a process that converts inputs to outputs and has some kind of feedback that governs its behavior. At the very simplest level, again, the heating air conditioning system in your home is a perfect example of a system. The inputs include fuel oil or power, sunlight, whatever kind of system you might have, and then there's a heat pump or a furnace or something that takes that input and converts it to heat if you're heating, or takes heat out of the air if you're trying to cool, and it has a thermostat that detects what the room temperature actually is and tells the system whether to turn on or off. And that's the very simplest level. But we have a lot of different kinds of systems and organizations, and some of these have much more serious consequences than others. Some of those are shown on this slide. We have measurement systems where we're trying to measure performance, trying to figure out what people do. And we had quite a discussion about this in a seminar this week about trying to measure employee performance so that we can evaluate them. And it's not too hard to measure the performance of someone that's making some kind of tangible thing. But when you talk about knowledge work, then it becomes much more difficult, and in fact becomes witchcraft and magic sometimes. There's the reward system in the organization, the communication system, inventory control, payroll, hiring and termination, legal systems, employee evaluation, purchasing. In automobiles and airplanes and ships, we have navigation systems, we have coaching, design, we have a penal system out there for people who break the law, and resource allocation. And this is just a very small representation. There are others that we certainly could identify. Now, some years ago, Dr. Edwards Deming, pardon me one second, Dr. Edwards Deming admonished managers to fix systems before trying to fix employees, because leaving a system intact will continue to generate the same behavior that it always has. And alternatively, if the system won't allow desired behavior, there's no use in admonishing employees to do it right the first time. Now, there's a very interesting phenomenon that takes place in organizations, and in psychology it's called the actor-observer difference in attributions. And I didn't make a slide for this, it just occurred to me a few minutes ago, so I'm going to just kind of wing it and tell you about it. When you observe one of the members of your project teams behaving in a certain way, particularly if their performance is not quite what you'd like it to be, observers tend to always attribute the cause of behavior to the person being observed. But the person being observed, if asked why they behaved the way they did, will generally say there was something about the system they were in that caused their behavior. or prevented good behavior. I couldn't do it because such and such was going on. And observers always feel a bit suspicious about that. We tend to think that this is just a cop-out, that the person's making excuses. But if you've ever been the victim of an attribution like that and felt that you were wrongly accused, if you will, then you know what I'm talking about. And so in many cases, the person who's doing the acting and is claiming that they couldn't perform as they wanted to, or that something happened that caused them to behave a certain way, in some cases they are correct. And we're going to illustrate that. So my point here would be to say to you, be very sensitive about this, because in many cases the person is right, and if the system is the cause of undesirable behavior, we certainly have to fix that system before we can expect better behavior. Now, Dr. Deming, some of you may be too young to remember, in 1980, the United States rediscovered a man who was sent over to Japan at the end of World War II to help the Japanese improve quality. There was a point in time, which most of you don't remember, when if it said made in Japan, it was synonymous with junk, because the Japanese product quality at that point in time was really bad. And Dr. Deming, Peter Drucker, Dr. Duran, and Dr. Feigenbaum, and a number of other Americans were sent over to help Japan rebuild and to improve their quality. And so in 1980, Dr. Deming was rediscovered by Americans and brought back over to the U.S. to help us with our own lagging quality, particularly in things like the automotive industry. And I couldn't find an illustration of a bowl of red and white beads, but I did find one that had beads in general. And his bowl that he used to demonstrate this contained red and white beads in a bowl, and he told the audience that there were 10% red beads and the remainder of them were white. And he had a little demonstration that he did where he had people come up from the audience to participate in the demonstration. One person was selected to supervise the other people, and she was told that her job was to ensure that the people doing their work didn't make any defects. Now, what they were going to do is draw marbles or beads out of the bowl, and they had to do it a very special way. And the idea was that they were not to pull out any red beads, because those were considered to be defects. And to get the beads out of the bowl, they couldn't just use their hand. That would be way too simple. Instead, they had to insert a paddle into the bowl, like the one that I'm going to show you just a close-up section of. The paddle had a bunch of holes drilled in it, and as you insert it into the bowl, the beads would adhere to these little holes, and you pull it out, and then you count the red beads and record the number on a flip chart. So you automatically know the percentage of red beads for the paddle, because all the holes would have beads in them, or if not, you would just adjust accordingly. Okay, so interestingly, as they went through this little demonstration, of course, they would always have some red beads, and they kept putting the red beads back in the bowl so the population stayed at 10%. And they would record the red beads, the defects, and Deming would then admonish the supervisor that she had to do better. And he had a lot of fun with this. He would tell her that, look, that person just got more defects than the previous one. You got to do better. And so the poor supervisor, who is getting more and more frustrated trying to figure out what to do, suggests that they hold the paddle differently, and maybe they change the angle, and maybe they need to go faster or go slower or pull the paddle out more carefully, or maybe they can do something to kind of jog the red beads out. And people try this and nothing works. And so Deming goes through this long sequence in which people are pulling these paddles out, and he tells everybody to go and sit down, and they're going to then tally the data and see what the average defect level will be. And he asks the audience what they think it's going to be before they actually run all the numbers, and everybody says 10%. And Deming says, why 10%? Why 10%? Well, because you said the population stays constant at 10%. And Deming won't accept that as an answer. And this is really puzzling to people, particularly those that have had some statistics. They can't figure out why Deming won't accept the answer. It has to be 10% by logic, because the population stays constant, and oh yeah, there might be a little variation, but not that much. And so the question is, do you know the answer? And I'll let you think about it a little bit. But here's what goes on in the classroom. Somebody finally gets an answer. Maybe it has something to do with the paddle or the beads. And Deming says, now you're on the right track. He tells them to think about how red beads are made. And he explains that red beads are made by dyeing white beads, which means that they have a slightly larger diameter than the white beads. Now, you and I both know that's a minuscule difference, but it is a difference, okay? And so anything that creates a difference can create variation in performance of a system. And so he then talks about the paddles, and he says, I have 3 paddles. One of them settles down to exactly 10.0%. Another one settles down to about 9.85%, and a third one settles down at 10.2%. It doesn't matter how you hold the paddle, how you process the beads, what you do. The percent defects is determined by the system, not the people. Now, I was a quality manager for about 2 years before I left industry, and I got indoctrinated into Phil Crosby's zero defects system, which was initiated at ITT where I worked. And one of Phil Crosby's principles was do it right the first time, because it's always cheaper to do it right than to have to do it over. And so Deming, I think, had a little fun with this, because, as he said, if you have a system that's going to inherently make 10.2% defects, you can't tell people to do it right the first time. They can do anything they want to, and it's not going to affect the outcome. And so this is why he admonished managers, who really are the people that control systems, to make sure that the system itself is capable of the performance that you're looking for. And so we have to continuously ask ourselves, if we're not getting the kind of performance we're looking for in an organization, whether it be a project team or department, is it because we have a system that's not capable of the right performance, or is it the people? And if you are satisfied that some people in the system can perform better than others, then it can't be the system. But if they're all performing at about the same kind of level, then it certainly might be the system. And so you need to examine that to find out what's happening. Okay, here's another example. Again, it's been a number of years since this book came out, so there may be a lot of you who never read it. But about 20 years ago, Peter Senge, who was a professor at a major university in the Northeast, and I don't recall which one to tell you the truth, wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. And the fifth discipline was the learning discipline. And the point was that organizations need to learn from their experience. And to illustrate how performance can be a function of the systems involved, Senge had a game called a beer game that he played with students and faculty and people in training seminars and so on. And his beer game worked like this. According to his scenario, convenience stores such as 7-Eleven stores sold a beer called Love Beer, and on a usual basis they would sell about 4 cases a month. But all of a sudden sales of Love Beer start climbing, and it's because the beer has been mentioned in a song and people are interested in trying out the beer to see if it's any good, and so they start coming into the stores and ordering Love Beer, and the sales are just going like crazy. So pretty soon the stores run out of the little 4 cases that they normally keep on hand, and so they start calling their distributors and saying, send me some beer. They pass those orders on to the brewery. Now this is a small brewery, and pretty soon they are just totally overwhelmed with orders and they can't keep up with production. So they start working overtime trying to produce enough beer to meet the demand, and they start out ordering more raw materials, and of course the people that deliver the raw materials to them can't deliver immediately, and so it's just a mad race trying to produce as much as you can. And they even realize that they're going to have to hire a second shift of workers to keep up with the demand. And of course they're elated, but it's because it is a good problem to have, but at the same time it's really frustrating not to be able to manufacture at the rate that they need to. Of course, the next thing you know, sales just drop like a rock. And the reason is, of course, that the beer's not that great. And once people have tried it and found out it's not as good as other brands that they have been buying, they quit buying it. There might be a few converts, of course, but by and large, it's not so good that people are going to switch from whatever they've been drinking. The problem, of course, is that all those orders for raw materials are in the pipeline, the orders from the stores for more beer are in the pipeline, and people start canceling all those orders. But it takes time to cancel orders. Everything's moving, okay? And so it's just a disaster. Now, Peter Senge points out that this is an archetypal system called a boom-bust system. And he talks about Nolan Bushnell, who started Atari Computer and went right through the very same cycle. His business boomed to the point that he could not keep up with demand, and along come some alternative systems, and people switched to those because they could get those and they couldn't get his thing. Now, Senge tells us, and this is the most significant thing on this slide, the very last little paragraph down there, Senge tells us that regardless of who plays this game, the outcome is always the same. He says, I've had MBA students, I've had engineers, I've had artists, I've had different nationalities, all kinds of people from all kinds of places and backgrounds, and the outcome is always the same, and the conclusion is inescapable. It's the system itself that causes the behavior. And the reason for the system problem is the fact that there is a delay in the feedback loop, so that by the time the information comes in to tell us what's going to happen, it's too late. We can't respond fast enough. And so we need real-time information. And even with real-time information, it can be somewhat difficult to control these things. But that's a perfect example that the system itself is going to get you in trouble. And Peter Senge's book is full of those kinds of examples of how archetypal systems exist in organizations, and gets the organization into trouble, and managers are powerless to do anything about it unless they can find a way to actually change the system. And I'm going to be very candid with you. One of the things that was always a problem was Peter had a generic answer to the question, which was that you had to find a high leverage point in a system and make a change there in order to change the nature of the system. But I can be candid with you and tell you that that's not so easy to do. Also, he was interviewed by Fast Company magazine about 15 years after his first book came out, or his book first came out, and he was asked, what's your prognosis for organizations learning about these things? And he said, well, it's possible, but it's not very likely. In other words, Peter had become very cynical about the ability of organizations to learn, and this is certainly borne out by research, particularly a book called Learning from Failure, which says that most organizations don't learn by failure. Okay, so I know I could get us totally demoralized here, and we might just quit and all go back home and give up, but we have to be aware of the problem before we can address it and fix it. So let's talk about some more of these things. One of the most insidious systems in an organization is the reward system. You know, you hear people talk about pay for performance and all that sort of thing. Alfie Kahn wrote a book a few years ago called Punished by Rewards. And in his book, he pointed out that pay for performance systems almost always blow up. they backfire somewhere along the line because people don't consider them fair. It's like the performance evaluation system where we say, okay, if you perform at a really high level, we'll give you a 2% raise, and if you don't perform at a very high level, we'll give you a 1% raise. And the person who got the 2% raise feels really cheated to have had to work as hard as they did and get 2%, and the other person got 1%, and then somebody at the very bottom of the pile got nothing. And so these kinds of situations always happen. The other thing that happens is we often reward things we don't want rather than things that we do want. And you will see this with children. If you have children, sometimes you inadvertently reward them for misbehaving without even realizing you're doing it. Because sometimes if a child is ignored at school all day long and they come home and they've gotten into a little bit of trouble at school and you start paying attention to them, the attention that they get is actually rewarding compared to being ignored. So sometimes you can accidentally reward bad performance or bad behavior without realizing you're doing it. If you have some examples of this, if you notice in your question panel, just type a couple of comments or words in there, and I will put this slide down long enough that I can actually type responses onto the slide so that we can share them with people. Some examples of how reward systems have affected behavior negatively in your organization. Just enter them in the question panel, and I'll convert them for you. Ah, good one. Okay, someone says 2 performers being rewarded with more work. Great one. Absolutely. Sometimes it's not a good idea to perform too well because they just give you more to do. And I knew a company once upon a time that would take good performers and overload them to the point that they eventually would leave. And then they wondered what happened. And I said, well, you killed them. That's what happened. Someone else have an example? While you're thinking, I'll make one comment. What is rewarded tends to get done. Okay. Someone says a client renews Okay, thank you. Those 2 are from Kimberly and Terry. Anyone else have an example where reward systems have created problems or backfired or done something of that nature? We won't belabor this too long. I just thought I'd get a few examples from you folks. Kelly says, we are a company with remote she clarifies by saying free food and company outings. Michael says, oops. Promoting somebody just to keep them in the organization, and I'm assuming, Mike, that what you're saying is that you promote them when they probably should have been terminated or something because it's difficult to get rid of people and they're causing problems. So sometimes they get a reward that is inconsistent with their with their actual behavior. Okay, all right, that's good. Thank you very much for those contributions. We can, as you can see, make these things, and Michael confirms that's correct, we can make these things a bit interactive. The reason I don't use voice is simply because the bandwidth problem gets to be so bad sometimes that the system just crashes, and I find that the typing messages works better. And for those of you that might want to ask some questions, if you do have a question, you can type that in the question panel, and I'll either try to answer them near the end of the webinar, or I will take them later, or respond by email. One that came in from Tom just now is that safety may not report an incident that should have been reported because of the negative consequences of those kinds of things. Okay. This is a similar kind of a thing, because reward systems and measurement systems can go sort of hand in hand, but there's definitely a difference between them. One of the things that Deming talked about was that what you measure is what gets done, and people will try always to maximize their measures, and so it's really important that we be measuring the right thing, the thing that we find important to us. And so, for example, in projects, if a manager is measured on getting his or her department's work done, she won't willingly give you a person for your project because it limits her own performance measure in some way. Now, we see this in projects all the time where functional managers do not want to give up their people to work on your project simply because it's going to keep them from being able to do their department work. And I worked with a company a number of years ago that had this with their shipping department, where the shipping department was told that they had to keep shipping costs down. They were trying to minimize expenses and make sure that the shipping was optimal, that things were shipped by the least expensive way usually. And sometimes the sales department would have a customer call in and say, I'd really like a sample of that particular product, and because I want to see if it'll work in my application, and if it will, then of course I'll give you orders for more things pretty soon. And so the salespeople go to the shipping department and say, will you send a sample out overnight? And they say, no way we're going to do that. It's going to be too expensive, and see, it's going to negatively affect their measure. And so they won't cooperate for that very reason. So that's an example of a measurement, and I'm sure that you can think of others. One of the ways to solve this problem is to change the measures so that managers are gauged on how well they support projects. Randy England, who used to work at Hewlett-Packard, had a book out called Creating an Environment for Successful Projects, and he pointed out that in most organizations we are functionally organized so that functions are king, so to speak, and projects are often seen by many of those people as just a pure nuisance, because they are taking resources from the functional groups to get project work done, and they are keeping the departments from being able to do their own work. So one of the ways to deal with it is to say, actually, projects are king and departments support those, and therefore you're measured on how well you support projects. Now, one of the difficulties for you and me is that if you and I are project managers, we certainly can't do that. That has to be done by somebody in a senior management position. But it is something that you may want to pass on as a recommendation for the senior managers. Russ, I see your hand, but I don't have a way to let you speak, so can you just type me a note and let me know what's going on? For those of you that haven't noticed, you can hold up your hand if you have a question or something, but everybody's muted right now. So, okay. Another example of the measurement system creating a problem is one that Deming talked about in his work on quality improvement. And he said that a lot of times we are trying really hard to maximize production, and so we run our machines full bore, just flat out, as we say, And we do that so we can keep output high, and we're unwilling to take those machines down for any kind of preventive maintenance. And of course, the problem you have with that is that at some point in time, preventive maintenance isn't being done and the machines begin to break down. And when they do begin to break down, those repairs are often much more expensive than they would have been if they'd been done in a pure preventive maintenance way. And if you think about aircraft, I used to fly an awful lot, and thankfully I don't do so much of it anymore. You don't want them to fly the plane until the engines finally decide to quit mid-air. That's an extreme example, I know, but it certainly is a very good one. The other thing that you're seeing in terms of systems is, if you haven't thought about it, you are an element in a human system. And one of the problems that we have with organizations now during the past few years, when we've been in a recessionary mode, we have gotten rid of as many people as we could. We're working in a lean mean mode, as we call it. So we have so few people that it's really difficult to get the work done. And what a lot of you are having to do is you're trying to work overtime in order to get all the output done. And the problem you have is statistics say that after you work 10 hours of overtime a week for about 3 weeks in a row, your productivity falls back down to about what it was in the 40-hour level, and your error rate goes up significantly. So one of the flaws in the lean mean model is that it leads to more errors, it leads to burnout, it leads ultimately to turnover when people have an option, a choice to be able to go somewhere else than they ultimately do. So we have to be very careful with this human system element, that we are not creating all kinds of problems for ourselves. Now here's one that I found or read about, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, and I thought was absolutely fascinating, and it may not be true any longer, but this was one that I thought was just amazing. At that point in time, the population in India was such that they had no social security, and so as people aged, it turned out that when they became unable to work, their children had to take care of them. There was also no real good health care or nursing homes and things of that nature in India, so it fell upon the children to take care of their parents. Also, child mortality rates were pretty high in India, so a lot of children didn't survive, and it turned out that in order for enough children to survive to be sure that someone was there to take care of parents, the birth rate had to be at about 4.4 children per family. And the amazing thing was that the system in India had settled down to almost precisely that level. In other words, the birth rate was about 4.4 children, which was exactly what the mathematical model said it should be in order for people to be able to survive and have enough security to live out their old age. And I thought that was just a fascinating thing. Okay, I want to, this seminar or this webinar is not going to be quite as extensive as some. I want to ask you to think about what we've talked about here, and I want you to look at the systems in your projects and ask yourself where you have system issues that may themselves be causing some sort of problem for you. And I'm going to suggest to you that you get a copy of Peter Singe's book, The Fifth Discipline, and take a look at the system archetypes that he talks about there, because what you're going to find is that many of those archetypes are alive and well today in today's organizations. And if those archetypes are causing you any kind of performance problems, performance deficits in your organization, then they need to be corrected in whatever way you can before any behavior change is going to take place. There's an old saying in psychology that most of you have heard, I'm sure: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And insanity is to keep on doing what you've always done and hope you'll get a different result. And that certainly goes for systems. So unless we fix our systems in our organizations, these things are not going to change. The author of the book on failure, I don't remember the names of those. It was two authors, and it's called Learning from Failure. And if you Google it, I'm reasonably sure you'll find it. They also point out that about the only people that learn from failure are people involved in plane crashes. In other words, the NTSB goes in and investigates plane crashes and tries to determine what caused them to crash, and then they try to put procedures and things in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. But most organizations tend to repeat their mistakes. They do the same things over and over again, get the same kind of results, and again, the thing they do that's wrong is they think it's the people, and so they try to admonish the people to do things differently, and they change the structure of the organization, and occasionally they get it right when they do that. I'm going to back up just a minute and just do something with this slide. I'm going to put a little note here for you. If you map communications, what you find is some people are hubs. And I don't have a good way to draw this. But there are people who are connected to other people through hubs, and occasionally in an organization you'll have a layoff of some kind, and the one of the hubs will get eliminated, and when that happens, you break your communications. So you have to be aware of those kinds of networks and communication systems, or else you destroy a system which actually served to get the work done. And that's another kind of an example. There are certain people in the organization to whom everyone else goes to be connected to whatever's happening in the organization, and that informal communication network is the system that actually helps things happen. Another one is that occasionally we see people standing around at the break area chit-chatting, and we think that that's a bad thing. And so we tell people to quit doing that, and then the communication that is taking place there breaks down and doesn't function any longer. One of the systems that happens to break down when that takes place is sometimes the innovation system, because a lot of times when particularly senior scientists and other creative people are chit-chatting in the break room, that chit-chat serves to stimulate ideas that go back to the work, go back to the job itself, and emerge as new ideas. And so when you tell them to quit the chit-chat, you have just destroyed the mechanism by which the innovation takes place. This is a really, really important topic, and I can't emphasize strongly enough the need for us to make everybody in the organization aware of it. In fact, back in the heyday of Peter Singe's work, there were a lot of system thinking conferences around where people were trying to make the case for we need to think in systems terms. We can't just think in linear causal terms where A causes B. It's actually A causes B causes A. There is no such thing as unidirectional causality in human relations. It's always simultaneous and it's circular. So in terms of influence, for example, if I talk to you about, are you influencing me right now? Well, when you put up a question or raise your hand or whatever, that's an influence to me. If we're in a face-to-face classroom, your nonverbal responses are influencing me in some way. That is, if I'm paying attention, which if I'm a good instructor, I should be doing. And so if you say, well, is the learner sitting out there, are they having anything to do with the classroom? Yes, they are. And so linear causality just isn't something that makes any sense at all when it comes to human interaction and human systems and customer relations and manufacturing organizations and so on. So we really do need to be good systems thinkers and ask ourselves, what are the elements in the system that are affecting performance, and what do we do to fix them? I am also going to caution you, if you take a look at Alfie Kahn's book, Punished by Rewards, when that book came out, he got hate mail from people because they thought he was a kook, an idiot of some kind, because of course pay-for-performance systems work, because I'm in one and I'm getting paid for good performance, and I certainly do respond positively to it. What people don't understand is that they don't respond to pay itself. What they do is they want the money so that they can buy things with it that make their lives better. And so it's not the money itself that is the issue. It's the fact that the money allows them to live a better lifestyle. But in any case, no matter how you slice it, pay-for-performance systems almost invariably are found to be unfair. For example, if you look at how industrial engineers calculate production rates, they think, okay, it ought to take, let's say, 5 minutes to do this step, and so they set that as a standard. And if people typically do it in 5 minutes, they leave it alone. But if people start to do it faster than 5 minutes, they learn and they get it down to 4 minutes, then the industrial engineers will change the target to be 4 minutes. Now, if you were paying people extra money for doing it faster, they see that as a move to keep them from making money. And so your pay for performance just blows up on you eventually. So again, you got to be careful what you reward, because that's what you're going to get. And if you reward people for cheating, you get cheating. And if you reward people for having more children, they have more children. And so we see examples of this all over the place, where we create dependency in people by paying them enough that they really can't afford to work. All these guys you see out on the corners of the street with signs saying we'll work for food, many of those people are simply panhandling, because they found that they can make more money standing on a corner with a sign than they can a fair job, because minimum wage is $7 an hour, and 40 hours a week gives you a big $300, and nobody can live a very good life on $300. So some of these guys have a nice car parked down the street somewhere, and they collect their daily take and get in their car and go off and live somewhere that's pretty nice. And I don't mean to try to turn you into cynics. I'm just saying that the system is wrong, and you and I probably can't fix that one, but at least we need to know about it. So I want to tell you before we close today, and we're going to close a little bit early, and you'll still get your 1 PDU if that's what you're looking for. We do have a free online seminar going. It started last Thursday evening, and this will be the second session tonight. So it's called Total Success Principles, and it's one that I'm leading, and it is totally free, no cost, no obligation. There will be 12 one-hour sessions that go from 7 to 8 p.m. every Thursday evening, beginning March 7 last week and ending May 23rd. All the sessions, just like this one, are being recorded, so that if you miss one or can't get to it in time or whatever, you can review it. I usually get them uploaded by about noon the day after. And so if you want to register for it, I'm going to tell you a simple way to do this, and I'll do that by just putting this link up here. I've set up a new website to house all this stuff. It's howcanibesuccessful.ning.com, and you will see a listing under events for the success program if you're interested in. Membership in the Ning site is free, and I would certainly invite you to join that if you're interested. I've had a lot of help along the way in my 32-year seminar career and my 15-year industrial career before that, and getting through college and all those things. So I'm trying to give something back to people who are in the same path that I used to be in. So if you are interested, please join us for that. And let's see, there's one more. that's pretty much it. I'll send out an email in about a week that tells you the code number for this webinar so that you can claim your PDU with PMI if you are here for that reason. Good luck with your work. Enjoy the rest of your lunch hour, what 15 minutes or so is left of it. If you have any questions downstream, send me an email at lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com. That's lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com. And I'll be glad to try to answer your questions. And thank you for supporting our work, and have a good week and good weekend.